Hello, what is going on, people? Curious Brit here, back again. And today we're going to be reacting to fake cities that only exist inside China. If you like what you see, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and don't forget to subscribe. Now, let's get into it.
Has a bit of a reputation when it comes to taking inspiration from the ideas and products of other nations. But did you know that China of the East has straight up replicated some of planet Earth's most iconic locations? From a failed attempt at a Chinese Manhattan to a larger-than-life take on London's Tower Bridge, let's check out the crazy doppelganger cities of China. Number 10. Jackson Hole. Jackson Hole, Wyoming is a town with a rich history of cowboys and mountain men, full of the raw spirit of the US of A. That's exactly the spirit the developers of the Chinese knockoff version wanted to capture when they built a remarkable replica of the American town on the outskirts of Beijing. Jackson Hole, China, or as locals call it Hometown, USA, has its own cowboys, churches, and even a replica of Route 66 running through it. Not that the world-famous road is anywhere near the real Jackson Hole in America, but hey, I guess the place needs some originality. 1,000 homes were built for this Chinese resort, designed in styles reminiscent of old Western movies, and the houses have completely sold out since construction was completed. This makes it by far one of the most successful Chinese replica towns. The only snag is the price. Due to being within an hour's commute of China's capital, homes in the replica town can cost up to a whopping $2 million, with house prices having
expensive. Live in a replica of America.
Tripled since construction. But despite being an expensive place to live, the town is thriving and makes a nice change from the hustle and bustle of Chinese city life. Number 9. Halfway Holland. In the early 2000s, a project was launched by the Chinese government called One City, 9 Towns, which would see the construction of 9 themed districts in and around Shanghai. Each district was to be built in a way that represented a different European country. Zhengzhou, otherwise known as Holland Town, is one of these 9 districts. The buildings here have Dutch architecture, the roads are cobbled and
that looks like Amsterdam. Been to Amsterdam before, that looks like they're in Amsterdam, but it's in China. So why don't we just all go to China on holiday and we go everywhere at the same country?
Canals line the streets. There are even a few windmills to hammer home that Netherlands feel. Holland Town even has its own versions of the Netherlands Maritime Museum, Amsterdam's Bijenkorf department store, and Hofwijck Mansion. But there's just one problem. There are basically no people living there. There are next to no stores or restaurants open, and the half-finished houses are too expensive for locals to consider purchasing. Perhaps in the future people will flock to the town, but for now, most of the minimal footfall tends to be from wedding photographers and their clients. As China's GDP growth heavily relies on property development, countless ghost towns like these are constantly being built with no one to live in them. Number 8.
Why? If someone out there knows why the Chinese government wastes money on building these towns and cities, which no one moves into or lives in, what is the point? Couldn't they put that money into better resources and providing better amenities for the communities?
Somewhat Sweden. North of Stockholm, Sweden lies the town of Sigtuna, the country's oldest town, founded in 970 AD. But if you travel 6,000 or so miles east, you'll find a replica of the town on the outskirts of Shanghai, China. Lodian, also known as North Europe Town, is one of the 9 themed districts in and around Shanghai and has its own slightly downsized version of Lake Mälaren, Sweden's 3rd largest lake. However, unlike the original town, which boasts a population of just under 9,000, Lodian is essentially a ghost town and remains mostly incomplete, despite construction starting in the early 2000s. The lack of residents is
Waste
partially
of
due to the
money.
unrealistically high
China's
asking prices of the homes, as
flush
well as
the money
local
down the
superstitions
toilets.
about the construction. Would-be buyers complain that the Swedish architects responsible for the build failed to consider the Chinese principles of feng shui. Feng shui is a tradition in China to use energy to harmonize an individual with their environment and must be considered in the construction process. Initially, the developers banned the residents from remodeling their houses to fix their feng shui, but as homes failed to sell, they eventually gave in. Even so, the process of populating the town remained slow and unsuccessful, something that characterizes these strange, copy-pasted places. Number 7. Desolate Deutschland. One of the many copycat towns near Shanghai, Anting Germantown is exactly what it says on the tin. 20 miles from the busy metropolis and designed in 2001, Anting was intended to be home to up to 50,000 people upon its expected completion back in 2008. However, 12 years later, the town is yet to be finished. Anting is essentially a social experiment gone wrong, with only 1 in 5 apartments occupied in the pseudo-German town. Once again, this comes down to a mixture of unaffordable, poor-quality housing, as well as the lack of regard for feng shui the apartments harbor. Specifically, most of the apartment windows face east and west, rather than north and south as the feng shui tradition dictates. Riddled with issues like these since its construction, Anting is another ghost town and is so empty that most businesses have shut down and the streets are deserted. Worst of all, the annual Oktoberfest has been permanently canceled since 2011, thanks to the lack of people around to enjoy the festivities. Now that is a tragedy. Number 6. The Alps of Asia. Hallstatt is an idyllic Austrian village located in the mountains of the Alps. It's like nowhere else in the world, or so residents once believed. It was certainly a surprise when Hallstatt locals discovered in 2011 that their quaint little village had been replicated and rebuilt within the province of Guangdong, southeast China. They were not happy about it, as the likeness had been lifted without any semblance of consent. But once Hallstatt's mayor, Alexander Schutz, realized the tourism opportunities the publicity could garner for the original village, he had a change of heart. Schutz even attended the opening ceremony of his hometown's replica a year later. China's Hallstatt cost $940 million to build, but despite the original town's official approval, its houses are empty and unaffordable for the average local worker. These days, Hallstatt's replica
940 million to build the houses for no one to live in them. What an absolute waste. China, screw your head on, doing something wrong.
is mostly a tourist town and somewhere for Chinese newlyweds to have their wedding pictures taken without having to travel all the way to Europe. Number 5. Thames Town. Thames Town is another themed development located in the Songjiang district, and I'm pretty sure you can already guess where this town has taken its name from. Yep.
Oh, bloody hell, they've even got a replica London. They are taking the absolute piss on China. Yeah, you can rip off our phones, rip off our clothing companies. You don't have to rip off our country and architecture. Stuff that makes each country unique. No, you'd rather just pump all of it into China.
Thames Town is China's very own version of Merry-Old England,
What
taking
China
inspiration
not
from English
rip off?
places ranging from London City to British seaside towns. Thames Town has cobbled streets, terraced and timber-framed houses, and red telephone boxes galore. It even has statues of Winston Churchill and, of course, Harry Potter. The main objective behind the construction of Thames Town was
The UK doesn't even have statues of Harry Potter. Oh my God. What are you doing, China? Oh, let's get this video over with.
to provide accommodation for staff of nearby universities and their families. But despite initially costing $700 million to build, like many novelty towns like this, Thames Town is a virtual ghost town. Many of the houses are empty for most of the year, having been bought up early on as holiday homes for wealthy families. There are very few stores or community facilities, and the few houses that are available are too expensive for the average citizen of the Songjiang district. The population these days consists of wealthy holiday makers, tourists who can't afford to go to the real England, and a few security guards dressed in vaguely British uniforms. Looks like they forgot their hats though. Number 4. Little Italy. On the outskirts of Tianjin, a port city in northern China, lies an enormous 50-acre shopping mall. Except this isn't any old ordinary shopping center. The mall, which opened in 2011, is called Florentia Village and is in fact an Italian-themed, ultra-luxurious outlet aimed at the richest of the rich. With more than 200 shops, it features opulent brand stores like Prada, Gucci, and Fendi, to name a few. Gondolas glide under a replica of Venice's Rialto Bridge, while Rome's famous Spanish Steps and Colosseum also make appearances as motifs within the enormous mall space. Florentia Village is accessible by high-speed rail from Tianjin and Beijing and draws in between 10,000 to 25,000 visitors per day. For once, this one definitely isn't a ghost town, though replacing unaffordable low-quality accommodation with luxury shops might be cheating. Number 3. City of Bridges. The city of Suzhou can be found in eastern China along the banks of the Yangtze River. Known affectionately as the Venice of the East, Suzhou is a major economic center and a focal point for trade. And strangely enough, it's also home to a whopping 56 replica bridges, all
Oh my god. Oh, recreate Tower Bridge. What else are they going to recreate? Is there a Big Ben round the corner? London Eye?
based on iconic bridges from around the world. There's also a Venetian-style water town and a Dutch suburban living area, but the replica bridges are the real crowd pleasers. The city features a beefed-up quadruple tower version, London's Tower Bridge, as well as Sydney's Harbour Bridge and Paris's Pont Alexandre III, among others all across the city. These impressive structures can mainly be found in the Jiangqing district, a booming commercial trade area. In setting out to connect the city's flourishing trade zones with bridges, developers rejected traditional architecture, believing replication would earn more exposure for the city. While the constructions have gained the city international media attention, reaction from locals have been less positive. Many believe the replicas are devoid of any meaningful, unique culture or history, and are instead an embarrassing sign of unoriginality. It seems the government listened to these concerns as they spent $2.3 million renovating the replica London Bridge to look more Chinese. I'll leave you to decide.
Oh, that is hideous. You might as well have just left it as a replica.
Whether or not it was worth the money. Number 2. Mini Manhattan. In 2010, the first building was constructed in what was supposed to be China's very own version of Manhattan. With a construction cost of over $30 billion, the Yuzhaipu Financial District in Tianjin, northern China was supposed to rival Beijing and Shanghai as the nation's economic top spot city, capturing the visual spirit of New York's iconic skyline. There were plans for copies of the Rockefeller Buildings, Lincoln Center, and even a Juilliard School of Music. It was hoped by the developers and by the Chinese government that the Yuzhaipu Financial District would become the capital of global finance once it was all finished. This, however, hasn't come to pass, and the district is still years from completion. As is common with many overambitious Chinese developments, the construction was intended to create the illusion of economic success, hoping to spur genuine economic growth in the aftermath. Unfortunately, financial troubles took their toll and construction ground to an almost total standstill as the decade wore on. As of now, China's very own Mini Manhattan is little more than an unfinished ghost town filled with eerie, hollow skyscrapers with no finish line in sight. Before I get to the strangest Chinese replica city of all, here are a few honorable mentions that didn't quite make the cut. First up is Fisherman's Wharf, a hotel and retail complex in Say, Macau. Opening in 2006, Fisherman's Wharf is home to casinos and hotels based on architectural themes from all over the world. It even boasts a replica of the Roman Colosseum too. Gladiator battles not included. Next up, the now abandoned Wangu Park is the final resting place of numerous replicas that range from the Egyptian pyramids and pillars to Dutch windmills and German castles. While it's been abandoned for 2 decades, it still draws in quite a few curious tourists. And finally, I'd be remiss not to mention Shenzhen's Window of the World theme park. The impressive destination is home to miniature copies of St. Peter's Basilica, the Sphinx, and Christ the Redeemer, among many others. Refreshingly far from being a ghost town, this popular theme park is worth checking out if you find yourself in southern China. Number 1. Imposter Paris. Built with astonishing attention to detail, Chiang Duching is a housing estate in the suburbs of Hangzhou in eastern China, closely inspired by the city of love, Paris. Covering almost 12 square miles with Parisian-inspired architecture, landscaping, and fountains, this copycat town is also home to a replica of the Eiffel Tower. For some locals, this one-third size copy of the famous tower is somewhat of an embarrassing, tasteless eyesore. But it brings in much-needed tourists that keep the local economy afloat. Development started in 2007 with the town initially designed to accommodate around 10,000 people. After a slow start, the town is now reportedly home to almost 30,000 people, with the area set to expand further in 2021. However, the notably non-Chinese style of this replica town, like others of its kind, has been accused by the Chinese government of being at odds with socialist core values. This governmental disapproval could see the town's streets, like Chiang Duching's L'Avenue des Champs-Élysées, being renamed to something more Chinese in the future. But for now,
we'll always have Paris.
Even if it is a Chinese knockoff. Which knockoff Chinese city would you go to visit? Let me know.
Well, that was a fucking shock. Fucking hell, what haven't China ripped off? It's our phones, it's our clothing, it's our fucking cities and bridges. But anyway, if you've got anything you'd like me to react to, drop it in the comments down there. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, change it from red to grey, turn on bell notifications so you never miss an upload. And until next time, I've been a Curious Brit. Goodbye.